Hello everybody, let's make a start on this week's live stream. So if you're new to this, I do it normally every Friday at 2:30 UK time. We'll have a catch up with the major markets. Well, first of all, we'll have a look ahead to the major announcements for next week, and then we'll do a catch up on the major markets, indices, a bit of FX, commodities, oil, natural gas, the usual stuff. What did we have this week? The big news this week was US inflation, wasn't it? Below 5% for the first time in 2 years. So we've seen that continue to drop. We had a UK interest rate rise yesterday on Thursday, which was pretty much as expected, 0.25% interest rate rise. Markets, to me, they have felt a bit sluggish in the last couple of weeks, last 4 weeks or so. Saying that, I'm looking at the Nasdaq here. The Nasdaq, just today, we're seeing it push out again to a fresh recovery high. We'll come back and look at that in a bit more detail. Let's get some of the housekeeping stuff out of the way first. So let's do a risk warning. This presentation is only for educational purposes. It does not contain and should not be construed as containing investment advice or an investment recommendation or an offer of or solicitation for a transaction in any financial instrument. David Jones accepts no responsibility for any use that may be made of these comments and for any consequences that result. You should consider whether you understand how spread bets, CFDs, futures, foreign exchange work, and whether you can afford to take the high risk of losing your money. Trading is risky. Okay. So next week, it's a quieter week next week. The major announcements that I picked out, there's only a couple I could see, and they're on Tuesday of next week. First of all, in the morning, EU GDP. So how well is the European economy doing? So we'll get a bit of a read of that on Tuesday. And then later in the day, night time, I think UK time at least anyway, we have Japanese GDP coming out. So Tuesday is the big announcement day for next week. I mean, clearly we've had, with the payrolls a week ago, we had US inflation, UK interest rates this week. We've had quite a lot of data out in the last week or so. So a bit of a quieter week next week. Let's see how it goes. A quick word from me as usual on the trading course I run. There are 2 parts to the course, 1 cost for 2 courses. There's a medium-term trading course, taking positions over weeks and months, a more relaxed approach to trading, which is definitely the one I favour. There's 11 video lessons on that. There's a more aggressive trading course or trading approach, taking positions over hours and days. There are 7 video lessons on that. There are live webinars included with all the various packages, and there's a WhatsApp group I run. So to find out more, just go to the website. This is the snapshot I show. I traded this. If you go back to some of the YouTube videos I did November, December, I talked about the ongoing progress of this account back then. But I set up a £4,000 account at the end of October, traded it for 3 months using the principles on the course, the short-term course, and it made just under £2,200 by the end of January. So again, there are more details on that on the website, but this is the snapshot from that account, what the P&L looked like. 5-star Trustpilot reviews, which is very good, because I understand it's always going to be a bit of a leap of faith, isn't it, to sign up for anything, because there's so many trading courses out there are just promise the dream and don't deliver. But so Trustpilot, if you search for David Jones Trading on Trustpilot, you'll see the reviews in there. So all 5-star reviews. Thanks very much for that. There's a newsletter that I send out every weekend. This week's will probably go out on Sunday. If you go to the website, if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, if you go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk, it should appear down here. There's the box. If you're not on the newsletter list, if you go to the website, scroll down, you can sign up there. And if you go into the site, there's details on the courses. There's details about the broker I use. I did a short video, 10-minute video on that. So it's all in the website there. And there's the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. As usual, the link will be in the description down here. Right, let's have a look what's going on. So like I say, a bit of a sluggish few weeks, it feels like to me. We might do some trades today. These are the trades we've done in the past on this live session. We did Nvidia last week, I think, didn't we? Bought it at 281, It's 287 now. Did Pioneer Natural Resources, that's underwater at the moment. There's a few other little trades in there. Nasdaq trade is the one that's doing the best. So overall, those open positions are up about £280 so far. We'll see if there's a trade to do today. But let's have a look. Let's have a look at the markets. So, like I said, I feel it has been boring. I think is the word. I said I run this WhatsApp group for those people who are on the course, and you can also sign up for it separately if you go to the website. I think the last few weeks have been boring, but if you look at the trend on the Nasdaq, I've got a medium-term trade on the Nasdaq. The market is still going up. I'm happy to stay long. We are seeing today on the Nasdaq hitting a fresh recovery high. I wonder if these old highs on the Nasdaq from August last year will end up being a problem, around 13,700. But for me, on the Nasdaq at the moment, happy to buy the dips. Not much has changed on that for me over the last few weeks. S&P, a little bit hard to work, the S&P. But still, this is what I mean by markets being pretty flat. The S&P is trading today pretty much where it was at the beginning of April, 6 weeks ago. So we've had a bit of noise, but no real direction. But the medium term, that trend is still up on the S&P. I saw an interesting thing about an hour ago. If it wasn't for the AI stocks, and I don't know what stocks you'd classify as AI stocks within the S&P, this whole artificial intelligence hype thing that we're seeing this year, the S&P would be down 2% for the year to date. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But pretty boring 6 weeks or so. But the big trend still up in the S&P. So, if we did have a bit of volatility and a bit of a sell-off to 4,000, it looks like a buy the dip opportunity to me. But nothing too exciting. The Russell, we looked at that last week. The Russell 2000, pretty boring again. But, it's at the bottom of the range, isn't it? So for me, it's more of a buy than a sell. The DAX, bit of volatility in the DAX. I'm long the DAX as well on a medium-term trade. I'd be a buyer of the DAX. Now, maybe that's an interesting trade for this afternoon or next week. It's been selling off all this week. We've had these 4 red candles all this week. Bit of strength today. Let's see how it finishes today. But maybe there's a trade there on Monday. But again, we've got these all-time highs coming in on the DAX from Jan 22, so just over a year ago, ahead of 16,300. I wonder if that ends up being a problem. Let's see. FTSE, again, a bit boring. I'd be a buyer of the FTSE now, though. I think maybe that's an interesting trade on the FTSE. If we do see stock markets move a bit higher next week, if I was a buyer today, then there's an argument for having a stop underneath yesterday's low. But again, a little bit boring. So stock markets, the most interesting one is the Nasdaq, because at least that is hitting a fresh recovery high. Everything else, like I said at the beginning, is just a little bit choppy and not that exciting. But overall, still positive for me for US stock markets. If we look at the dollar index, I do have a trade on the dollar index. I've got a trade in this account here, actually. There we go. There's a trade in that account there. So bought it at 101.71 and the market's 102.07 at the moment. I think, I talk about this dollar index a lot. It is one of my favourite markets. It's the dollar against a basket of different currencies. I think it's interesting that we had the low in February around 101 or thereabouts. The market rallied strongly. We've come back to it and we're bouncing around these old lows. So interesting to see over the course of the next few weeks. Is this the turnaround point for the dollar index? And clearly the impact that has on other markets as well. So for now, I'm happy to be long. I've got a short-term long myself as well, just off these levels really. Let's see. But we did see it in early May run out of steam around 102.40. Let's see if it breaks out through that level. But again, you can see, I think, looking at this, going back to the beginning of April, just how choppy and sideways this market has been as well. For me, I'm definitely more of a fan of the big trends. And we see the market maybe get a move on for a few days and then just run out of steam, has been the pattern in recent months. Let's see if it changes. Pound against the dollar. I nearly bought this yesterday. I didn't. I think it's interesting. I'm surprised it's been as weak as it has, but Let's look at the dailies, pound against the dollar. Let's just tidy this line up a bit. If I was to say, well, if we pick the trend up off these October lows, the trend is still up. We've maybe got a bit of an issue with these old highs from May last year, 1 year highs around 126.60. But I am absolutely looking to buy a dip in the pound against the dollar, but it is still dipping. And if I flip it over to an hourly chart, we'll see it there. It did, on Wednesday, it briefly managed a fresh recovery high, but it's given up those gains and it's still weak today. So this is another one on the list for me next week. Not much urgency to do anything today, but we've got really good support historically around 124.30. Let's see what happens down if it does slip that low. Is that when the buyers come back in for pound against the dollar? Let's see what happens. Similar for the euro, I suppose. If you look at the euro, again, another great trend in the euro against the dollar since September last year. It hit a fresh recovery high in April. And it's been selling off for the last week or so. So this is another one for me to be a buy of the dip. But clearly, so much of this hinges on what happens with the US dollar. If the US dollar is going to turn things around, then the likes of the euro and the pound continue to be under some pressure. So that's it. Again, nothing too exciting, but interesting markets, I think, to watch next week to see what happens here. What should we look at next? Let's look at gold and silver. As I often say with gold, I can't believe that gold is above $2,000 an ounce, but it is where it is. I think I can't see the argument for gold making fresh all-time highs from here, but let's see what happens. The trend is still up, absolutely still up since November of last year. It looks like it's dribbled down to 2,000 and bounced today. But again, look at all these markets, they're so scrappy. That's the last month on gold. That's month, 6 weeks on gold. A little bit of excitement now and again, then just drops back to being boring. So I don't know on gold. Short term, I'd still be a buyer of the dip. If it got knocked back to like 1960, something like that, it looks like a buy the dip trade. I can't quite know what the argument would be for gold to start pushing out to fresh all-time highs. But let's see. We did see very briefly a fresh all-time high just over a week ago. Couldn't build on it. But let's see what happens. If I wanted to be a buyer now, if I thought it was going to push higher next week, the closest I'd have my stop probably the other side of 1960 on gold. Let's see what happens. Silver got absolutely clobbered over the last couple of days or so. I've said it before, I always get wrong-footed by silver over the last couple of years, so I haven't traded it hardly at all. Looking at the charts, you could say, well, since Feb 2021, we have been in a downtrend. It's broken the downtrend. Has it broken the downtrend? Is it a buyer of the dip? I'd be tempted to be a buyer of the dip. Not that I would, because it'll do exactly the opposite to whatever I do. But I think it's maybe interesting here. Looking on the dailies, it is on the RSI. The RSI has dipped near oversold. First time we've been oversold. We're going to go back to March. So I think, again, this is maybe an interesting one to watch next week. Let's flip it over to the hourlies, because I can see perhaps there's a bit of support in there. What would be the levels I would watch? Maybe down here somewhere. $23.50 was an important low, short-term low, beginning of April, because the market rallied $2.50 off that level. We saw a 10% rally off that level. So I think that's another interesting one to watch next week. If you thought the sell-off in silver had been overdone, are we going to see this 23.5 level hold again? Let's see, but pretty volatile week or so for the price of silver. So that's silver and gold. What should we look at next? Oil. I did an oil video yesterday. Another quite boring market. What's happening here? Hold on a second. Let's have a look. Actually, volatile, but directionless. And my charts, hang on, I've decided to freeze. So, I don't know where my RSI's gone. Hold on a second. Let's just try and refresh this and see what's going on here. There we go. It's interesting. Oh, that's the dollar index, which is interesting. But oil we had that move. You know, we've seen a lot of volatility in the last couple of months, but it's back to trading where it was at the end of March. You know, we had the cut by OPEC over the weekend that saw the price of oil gap higher on that Sunday night. It did move a bit higher, but then over the last week and a bit, you know, it's slipped back to that low from March, briefly punched below it on that weird flash crash thing we had. And we are where we are now. I think, again, you can see, you know, pretty directionless. This is going back to December. Pretty directionless overall. I think there are still concerns about a global recession weighing on the oil price. I don't even know what the trade is, but perhaps to be a buyer, if you thought the weakness over the last couple of days had been overdone, be a buyer with a stop the other side of $70. But another one that's just, you know, we have had some good trends in oil in the short term, but at the moment, if you look at it on a daily chart, it's just all a bit sideways, isn't it? And then natural gas, you know, I still think it's interesting down here, natural gas. The big trend is down, of course, from the summer of last year. But, you know, we are seeing, they have held again, these lows at 189 from April have held again. You know, so if you wanted to be, if I was a buyer of natural gas today, well, I would want my stop loss the other side of 189 down there, because you know, we know it's a volatile market. Let's see. And I still think, so it does add weight to the argument that perhaps natural gas is trying to build a base down here above these lows from mid-April. So yeah, that's it. That actually, I think, is the most boring bunch of markets we've looked at on these live streams in a long time, I think. So what to watch next? Because everything's just a bit scrappy at the moment. So what am I watching? NASDAQ, obviously, because the trend is up, and at least it has pushed out to its best levels since about August. So we're at a 9-month high on the NASDAQ, let's say, where we are now. So that is interesting. Dollar index, just to see what happens. Does this end up being an important base? Let's see. We've got a bit of resistance on the upside to watch out for, around 102.40. Let's see what happens there. And that's about it. And if you look at the bond markets, I never look at bonds much on this, but I do watch them for my own trading. I'm long T-bonds at the moment, US Treasuries. And again, you can see pretty sideways over the last 3 months, but this has been a base on Treasury. So you can see all sorts of markets just sort of hanging around and waiting for direction at the moment. Seems to be a theme across the board. But I think, you know, for me, still happy to buy dips on the NASDAQ. Interesting to see what happens with the likes of the pound next week, because it had been doing well, you know, and it's got pretty majorly clobbered the last couple of days. You know, it's lost 150, 160 points or so the last couple of days. Let's see if the buyers come back in for that. But yeah, not the most exciting time to be sat in front of the screen watching markets. Crypto, I forgot about crypto. Thanks for the reminder. Bitcoin, I do still want to be a buyer of Bitcoin, but not today. Not today. I do still think the recovery from Jan is still going strong. We are slipping below this old support. Interesting to see what happens today. Does it end up closing below that old support around 26,500? But I would be a buyer of a dip. Perhaps that's an interesting one for next week as well, actually, the old Bitcoin. Looking at that chart, so I'll be a buyer of the dip on Bitcoin. If it sells off a lot further from where we are now, it looks like an interesting trade from a risk-reward point of view. If it did move down to like 23, 24,000, something like that. So yeah, that looks interesting. Let's see what happens. So the usual quick reminder, to find out more about the trading course and everything else I do, go to davidjonestrading.co.uk. I'll put the link in the description. Sign up for the newsletter, which will go out on Sunday, I think, of this week. And the newsletter, a quick catch up with markets. What am I looking to trade over the next week? What am I trading at the moment? And a trading tip in there. Not a tip like go and buy NVIDIA, but a tip to try and help your trading approach. So if you go to the website, and there's also that page on there about the broker I use, that if we find anything interesting today, we might do a trade on it in here. So that's on the website. Right, now we will dive in to the stuff you want to have a look at. So let's have a look. What have we got? What do you think about gold? We looked at gold. I would buy the dip in the short term. I can't really believe that gold is going to go soaring away this year, but who knows? Let's see what happens. For now, the trend is still up, like I said, so let's see. Is it time to short sell silver? Not for me. We did all that, didn't we? Please have a look on ASML. ASML. Who's that? ASML Holdings. Is it the New York one? What do they do? Electronic technology. That looks a little bit boring to me. I think it's interesting. It's quite an interesting story. It's been on quite an interesting journey to get all X Factor about it over the last 18 months or so. Because we had the big sell-off, didn't we? Nice little downtrend, big downtrend, I should say, from about, what was it, $900 down to $380. We've had the recovery, and it's all gone a bit sideways now, isn't it? So for me, I'd still be a buyer. I wouldn't be in a hurry to buy at the moment because it's in the middle of the range, like so much at the moment. But if it got knocked back to the low 600s, I'd be a buyer. But it looks like some of that recovery momentum has disappeared. Sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Oh, it's gone. So yeah, not the most exciting. BYD, Boyd Gaming, is that the one? Boyd Gaming. Oh, that looks. That again has had a good run, hasn't it? I'd be a bit cautious up here because we're back into, if we sort of roughly plonk a line up there, this sort of 72 area was a problem back in April 21, was a problem in Feb 2022. Is it going to be a problem again? So I'd keep an eye on that for the breakout, BYD. So it'd be interesting if it starts breaking out through 72. They have earnings out this week. What do the earnings do? Oh no, it's just nothing. Let's see what happens. So for me, that's a great trend. I'd be a buyer of the dip. I'd rather wait for the break though, if I was a buyer up here. Swiss Japanese yen. Let's have a look at those. I would be a buyer next week, I think. I bought Euro yen this week. I got stopped out of that. But I still think it's an interesting trade, and perhaps it's the same for Swiss yen because we had the breakout on Swiss yen, something like that. Had a breakout, pulled back. It still made a new low for the sell-off yesterday, so I'd be quite happy to wait it out next week until Monday, and if it doesn't move lower today, I could be quite tempted to be a buyer next week with a stop at 149. It's below 149, I should say. So that's an interesting one. Buying the dip after the breakout for me on Swiss yen. What do you think about the upcoming news on the dollar? Don't know, don't really care. Just see how the market reacts, I would say. Beyond Meat. How are they doing at the moment? Because they did really well a few years ago. Are they still doing really well? No, is the quick answer. Oh my God, that's terrible. Everyone's given up being vegan. And they've all gone back to their ribeyes and their cheeseburgers. That's quite incredible, isn't it? So Beyond Meat, the old meat replacement thingy. So they came to the market, by the looks of it, in May 2019, so 4 years ago. Traded as high as $2.40, and here we are at $10.40. Beyond Meat price target cut to $12 from $20 at Mizuho. Isn't that ridiculous? That the stock is trading at $10.40 and some investment bank has cut their target from 20 to 12. Well, that's really useful, isn't it? That looks absolutely bombed out at the moment, doesn't it? What's that? Do they have earnings this week? What do the earnings look like? Earnings estimate for a loss of $1 a share came in at only losing 92 cents a share. So a positive surprise there. But the market didn't really care, did it? Their earnings were not as bad as expected, and the stock price still went down. So for me, that is definitely not a buy. But interesting, assuming they stay in business, and there's no reason why they wouldn't. How long this downtrend carries on for. That has been pretty brutal, though, hasn't it? It's an interesting one, Beyond Meat. Yeah, still really weak though. So they're down. What are they down? So 240. They're down about 95% off their highs. Something like that, isn't it? Incredible. There you go. Beyond meat. Shorting oil on the break of 80 would have been a nice short-term trade. Let's have a look at that. Let's have a look on the shorter-term stuff. On the break of 80. On the break up, yeah. You mean the break up of 80 or the break down? The break down. Yeah, it would have been a nice little trade, that. Particularly that sell-off into there. But I short Brent instead, got higher position yesterday. Nvidia, so I do have the trade on Nvidia from last week. So bought them at just below 281. Let's have a look at it. Nvidia Corporation on the dailies. That looks all right to me. Yeah, I mean, the trend is just about still up, isn't it? Just got to be a bit patient, I think, given how sluggish markets have been at the moment. Just need to be a little bit patient on that. Earnings. Oh, they got earnings next week. No, is it next week? Week after next. Nvidia. So, let's see. But the trend is still up, so I'm quite happy to stick with the trade. Did natural gas. First Majestic Silver Corp. First Majestic Silver Corporation. Oh, it's just a bit boring, isn't it? I mean, what would you do? There's an argument to be a buyer, but saying that, the big trend is down, isn't it? You know, if you pick up on these Feb 2021 highs, the big trend is still down, isn't it? So it's not. If you wanted to do a bit of bottom fishing, be a buyer with a stop loss at the side of 550, but it doesn't look very exciting to me. Soybeans, good call. I am thinking about buying soybeans because it's not as strong an argument to be a buyer as it would have been if we went back to November last year, because we had this recovery going on in soybeans. Great, absolutely brilliant market here. I traded it a lot in 2020 and I think into early 2021. I think that, along with palladium, was one of my most profitable markets, I think, back then. Anyway, this is where we are now. So I think it's interesting what's happened, soybeans. So we had this trend, blah, 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 going on from July last year. It's fallen out of the trend. It has held above the old low at 1400. And lo and behold, it's come back to it again. So I think, it has lost they have lost some momentum, soybeans, definitely. But I think it's an interesting trade to maybe get an oversold bounce that goes back up to 1520, something like that. I don't know, with the stop the other side of 1400. So I'm not going to buy them today, but I think that's another interesting market for next week, soybeans. But it's a less compelling argument because we have fallen out of the trend, but interesting nonetheless. So thanks for that one. Canada, Swiss franc, Canadian dollar, Swiss franc, CAD chuff. Well, the trend is down, isn't it? So for me, I would want to be thinking about, well, where do I sell short? If I was a seller now, well, maybe there's an argument for being a seller now. The closest I'd have my stop would be above 67, and maybe to give it a bit more wiggle room, we go above these highs from late March. But I would be happy looking to sell short because, you know, it's only just over a week ago, it hit a new low for that down move, which looks like to be the lowest. We've got to go back years and years. Is that even an all-time low, maybe? I don't know. But yeah, for me, I'd be a seller. It's just a question of where does your stop go? WMB Williams Companies. I mean, again, I think it's sort of it's a bit sideways, isn't it? A bit dull. I suppose, you know, someone could say, well, the trend is down. If we wanted to be fairly pedantic about it, we could say the trend since June 22 is down. But whenever we've seen them down around 28 and a half, we have seen the buyers come back in. So perhaps it's a trade that you do if you really want to do a trade and you're just bored, with a stop loss the other side, so there's somewhere the other side of 28, maybe. So maybe. With everything trendless, would you focus on daily trends or would you trade the shorter term timeframes? I have definitely gone back the last 6 weeks to doing the daily trends because I'll tell you something. When I launched this short-term course thing in November to try and do some marketing for it, obviously, I traded it with a real account. I put $4,000 in and I was really surprised that it made 55% in 3 months. Okay, but it was the most intensive bit of short-term trading I've ever done. Looking at markets every day for 3 months, twice a day, and it was great. It was profitable, and if people like short-term trading, fair enough. There are lots of rules within that, but absolutely for my own trading, I much prefer the more medium-term approach. I'm absolutely not a fan of sitting in front of screens, and I end up spending far too much time sat in front of screens. Two of the best trades I've got running at the moment, they're options trades, so they're slightly different, but they're trades on the S&P and trades on oil. One options trade runs out next week on oil, and if oil pushed up to $73, I get the maximum profit. I've got another options trade that runs out in June on the S&P, and those trades have been running. The oil trade has been running for about 6 weeks. The S&P trade has been running for about 3 months. So for me, I'm much happier running longer term trades and building up lots of different trades. When I was doing it, the long term stuff more intensely a couple of years ago, I think at the peak I had maybe 35 to 40 open positions running, all sorts of different markets, and it worked really well. So as a general rule of thumb, even though we look at the short term stuff on these live streams, I am a much bigger fan of looking at the more medium-term swings, because it is hard, because with the short-term stuff, even if markets are trending well, if you look at the Nasdaq, for example, the Nasdaq has had a good trend, but there's been a lot of scrappiness in there as well. Yeah, so there's a lot of scrappiness day to day. But if you look on the daily, I can't remember when I put my trade on the Nasdaq. I think it was back in March or something in here. My medium-term trade, and just run it. So the trade is up maybe 700 points. And just run it, and then look to add to it if the market continues higher. So I am, as a general rule of thumb, a much bigger fan of more medium-term stuff. Tesla, do you have a trade on Tesla? How is our little Tesla trade doing? So we bought them at 160, just below 164. They're 175 at the moment. He has said, didn't he, Mr. Musk, yesterday, said he's stepping down, isn't he, from, he's got a new CEO lined up, potentially, for Twitter. So he's stepping down. I mean, it looks a bit unexciting. It's popped higher today on that news. I'm long. I think I did the trade in the live stream, buying this gap, saying the market had overreacted. It looks a bit boring, Tesla, though. Even though I'm in the trade at the moment, it still looks a bit boring. How much is it up, that trade? So it's up $50. Perhaps let's move the stop loss to break even on that trade, because it does look, I think, a little bit boring. So let's put a trailing stop on that trade now. So where to buy it? 163.90. They're 175 at the moment. Let's add a trailing stop so I can just forget about it for now. How many points away? 175. 1,100 points away. Is that right? No, it can't be. 11 points away. Or is 11.73p? No, I think that's that. Let me just check that. Hold on a sec. There we go. So bought them at 163, whatever it was, and the stop loss is around break even or thereabouts, or just below break even. So if it pushes a bit higher, the stop will get trailed. But looking at the chart, it just looks it's a little bit boring. Tesla. Let's see. Copper, yes, this is another one actually on my I think I might trade it but not quite yet list. It's an interesting one, copper. If I can find it, I can't find it. There it is. This is another one for me. I've got lots of trades at the moment that are like next week trades, but they were a week ago. They were next week trades as well. I mean, the trend for copper since July last year is up, but the trend for copper since January of this year has been down. So we have these mixed trends. So my assumption is the longer term trend is going to assert itself, but only today, just today, even though today's candle's green, it has slipped to its lowest levels since about November. So I'm thinking about being a buyer, but it needs to stop going down, copper. So I'm seeing does it start to hold in this 350, 370 area. So it's an interesting one to watch, but I've got to be patient. Euro, New Zealand dollar. I would be a buyer. There you go. But maybe not again. Maybe not today. Let's see where it finishes today. It's interesting that. So we could pick up trends all over the shop. I think on that one, couldn't we? I must admit, I don't look at these, not obscure FX markets, but some of these other markets. So I'd be a buyer, assuming we finish positive today. It looks like we will do. I'd be a buyer, and the closest I have my stop is maybe 171, and looking to see does it run back up to 180, 181. Do we get that sort of move on euro, New Zealand dollar? So that's a good one. Aussie dollar, US dollar. I think that's had a bit of a volatile week, isn't it, from memory? Let's have a look. Yeah, it's again, look at that. Just chop. For actually since the end of February. Chop. Just a range, isn't it? It's just in a range. And when it gets up to sort of 67, 68, it can't get through. When it falls down to wherever that is, 65, 66, the buyers come back out. At the moment, it's in the middle, so there's nothing for me there on Aussie dollar. Albemarle. Let's just flip this over to a daily chart. I think this is an interesting one, but I would be patient. So it's a bit of I think for me, it'd be a bit of a bottom fishing expedition, because we had these old lows at 170 from March 2022, so just over a year ago. But I would still be leaning towards the trend being down. So I wonder, do we get at least another, even though it's had a little go through the trend line, do we get another little revisit of those old lows? It's a very interesting one though. So if it holds above those lows, perhaps there's a little recovery play here. AMD, Advanced Micro Devices. I would be a buyer of the dip on that. I wouldn't go short. Yeah, I'd buy it. I would wait to see do we get a sell off back to the low 80s again. I mean, that's a nice recovery, that, isn't it? On that, so yeah. TMUS, T-Mobile. It's boring again, isn't it? It's a buy at the bottom of the range one, isn't it? We've seen it's an interesting trade, I suppose, short-term trades, because whenever we've seen it at 138, 140, it's held and then runs up to 152-ish. But again, it's a bit boring, isn't it? A bit rangy. Cocoa is an interesting one. This is another one of my. I think I might have missed. I felt like I missed the boat a bit this week on cocoa, but great trend since September. Bang, 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 bang. I was watching it here, then didn't pay attention. I would have bought in probably about here, 29.20. If we get a dip again in cocoa, it's a buy the dip one for me, I think. I didn't answer your question on natural gas. We did cover natural gas, so you can rewind when this is finished and you can watch the natural gas thing. Sugar has had a great trend, which I missed. I caught bits of it actually in January and March. I caught bits of it, but then I took my eye off the ball a bit and missed the really big move. The question is, with a market like this, we had this great trend, didn't we, from November, and then it really accelerated in March. Are we going to see it come crashing back to the uptrend, the uptrend line? So, down to maybe, 23 or something like that. Or are we going to see it take off? So it's one of those, it's a trickier one, isn't it? So for me, if I was a buyer today, I would probably have my stop at 24.50. But what I'd rather do is wait and see. And now I will, once again, demonstrate my incredible drawing skills. Do we get a bit of a wiggle back down to there and buy the dip? Or do we get a bit of a and a breakout? So for me, it's a tricky one to call. But an absolutely great trend. And I know there was somebody on the training course who was in that trend. I don't know if they're still in it. But this is a dream trade for me from a more medium-term perspective. to have a market, if you're in the trend and it just takes off, it's an absolutely painless trade because all you got to do is keep moving the stop up. But at the moment, it's a bit of a wait and see for me. So I'd much rather buy the dip, but if it goes breaking out through 27.50, then I'd start treating it like a breakout trade and be looking to buy. It's an interesting market though, sugar, because the moves we've seen in the last couple of months have taken out the old highs from 2016 at $24. So it is interesting. It's a big old move. The price of sugar is up, 50% since November of last year. How about TTWO? TTWO. Take Two Interactive Software. Okay, let's have a look at those. Again, I think there's a couple of ways you could come at this. You could take the view that the trend is down. We haven't done a trade today. This probably isn't going to be the trade we do either. You could take the view the trend is down. But then you could also take the view, well, is it trying to break the trend? I don't know. I think that is an interesting one though. I would say I would want to see more of a move through 128. So I wouldn't want to do anything yet personally, but I would buy a dip in it because that has been a great little trend chugging away. So I'd buy a dip to 120, but it's a bit of a wait and see. I think that's an interesting one to come back to over the next couple of weeks or so. TTWO, and that's it. And that's it at the moment, isn't it? There's no more questions. It is dull, and it's hard when it's dull to do nothing because I think if you're trading and looking at markets, we always think we should be doing something. So sitting on our hands and doing nothing is a difficult one. But I've definitely done a lot less the last couple of weeks, just because these markets have been so scrappy. So going into next week, stock markets recovery is still going strong. That's interesting to watch. This dollar thing is, I think, probably for me is the major thing to watch. Are we going to see the dollar turn around down here and really start a recovery? And that starts to be, for me, that's an interesting market to then start trading into the new trend there. But everything is all a little bit painful and boring at the moment. So let's see what the next week brings. So we'll wrap things up there. So don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. Go to the website, davidjonestrading.co.uk. Newsletter comes out it'll be Sunday this week. So I'll write it on Sunday. Have a look at the training courses on there as well. You can sign up for the WhatsApp group if you want to, separately, if you want to do that. I update it every day with stuff I'm looking at and what I think about markets. Any questions, you can drop me an email via the website. But otherwise, that's it, isn't it? We're done. So we'll do it all again next Friday, see where we are. Hopefully things are a bit more interesting this time next week. But, it can't be exciting all the time, can it? So thanks for coming along. And until next week, good luck with your trading and take a look at the website.